On location of your emergency?
Hi, something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
In plain sight. But 12 gauge brings it to light. Story fades to black. Cold wind through the courthouse. The evidence stacked. Mysterious whispers, facts twist in the rain. Trials and tears, fingerprints and pain. 12 gauge stellt truth on the line. Unsolved hearts and the edge of time. Through the light, we illuminate the signs. Justice speaks when the silence binds. Headlights flash on the long forgotten road. Photographs of faces, stories left untold. DNA and alibis, the gavel falls again. Every clue a heartbeat, every word a sin. Facts and fiction dance in disguise, but we're chasing the proof where the cold truth lies. From the old case files to the breaking news, we follow every lead till the trail bleeds through. 12 gauge.
Welcome to 12 Gauge Investigative, a no-holds-barred dive into the stories that others won't touch. We bring raw, unsanitized investigative content, from criminal cases and courtroom updates to underground movements and unsolved mysteries. If you're tired of the same sanitized headlines and want the truth served straight, you've found your channel. Strap in, subscribe, and join us on the investigation.
All right. Happy Friday to you all. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for being here and joining me. If you've been here before, I send out the salute as well for you to continue to come back. I know it's early morning, so I don't know how many people will actually be here joining me, but hopefully we get some people in the chat once they figure out that I am live. It's been a couple days since I actually went live. And I really didn't go live for a reason other than I just didn't feel that there was much out there to really talk about. But today I want to talk about some things that kind of intrigue me in the aspect of what I'm dealing with in real life. You know, in real life, we have situations that occur. We have situations where people actually do break the law. They actually are convicted of their crimes. It's not like on YouTube where, you know, somebody commits a crime and they get away with it based on public opinion because public opinion is stronger than a judge's order a lot of times. But in reality, a judge tells you if you plead that you are guilty, then you are guilty. There's no such thing as trying a case by public opinion. So today I wanted to talk about antisocial personality disorder. And the thing about being antisocial is, excuse me, good grief. Sorry about that. I hope none of you are wearing ear pods or anything like that because that could be rather loud. But the thing about antisocial personality disorder is individuals view it as such a negative connotation where only certain people have it, which is not true. There's a lot of individuals in society today that are very antisocial to the extreme that they're willing to argue, they're willing to fight, they're willing to have these kind of discussions based on emotional attachment of what they view as being right versus wrong. So let me get on with it and pull up the paperwork to really go over this because, like I said, not only do I work with this, but it is very intriguing if you dive into it and really understand what it is that it's talking about. Because this deals with true crime all over the spectrum. It really does. So says whenever we're talking about antisocial personality disorder, the diagnostic features are the essential features of antisocial personality disorder in the pervasive pattern of disregard or the violation of the rights of others that begins in childhood or early adolescence and continues into adulthood. Has also been referred to as psychopathy, sociopathy, or disocial personality disorder. So many times you have to ask yourself, when did this begin? When did they actually start understanding that this person could have possibly had this kind of disorder? Well, as this says, it starts very young. It starts very young, and it is basically the disregard for the violation of the rights of others. So we say, okay, well that's pretty cut and dry. But at the same time, people still have the limited understanding of what a disregard for other people is. So number two says typical features of antisocial personality disorder are failure to conform to lawful or ethical behavior, an egocentric, callous lack of concern for others, accompanied by deceitfulness, irresponsibility, manipulativeness, and or risk taking. So, a failure to conform to lawful or ethical behavior. What does that mean to you? Lawful behavior would be not breaking the law, right? Not getting yourself in situations where you're going to know that if I do this, this is going to be the consequence. So, breaking into somebody's home, that is unlawful behavior, correct? Most of the time we view that as B&E, burglary of a habitation. Even if you don't steal anything, you're still breaking and entering, right? You're still burglarizing somebody else's place, and it's against the law. I guess here in true crime, where we get so fixated on the ins and outs of whether somebody's actually whether the process was done right, whether the process was done wrong. It's in the regard of how we feel about the person that is being locked up, or do we have a personal interest of our own that has been unresolved? Like I've spoken about many times, if you have reenactments that are going on in your mind of something that happened that you weren't able to control, therefore a lot of times that that fuels your bias. It fuels your inability to look outside the box, so to speak. You might agree that something was wrong or that your thought pattern's not always right, but the simple fact that you have these unresolved issues in your mind, it's not going to let you see reality for what it is. And here in the true crime genre, we do talk about questioning everything, questioning everything. Okay, there's nothing wrong with questioning everything. There really isn't. But whenever we get to the point where we believe nothing, that's when it becomes maladaptive. And what do I mean by that? Maladaptive means that, you have a bias so extreme that it's coercing everything about you. Everybody you encounter, you have this inability to trust in their word, trust in their actions, or actually trust what you see. So, since we're talking about this, I want you to think about these three things right here: a failure to conform to lawful and ethical behavior, an egocentric, callous lack of concern for others, accompanied by deceitfulness, irresponsibility, manipulativeness, and risk taking. So, since we talk about Idaho so much, I'm gonna dive into that aspect with these three things. Since Brian Koberger is currently in prison serving four life sentences and a charge for burglary, I want you to think about what we're talking about today. More than one person has stated that Mr. Koberger was indeed very controlling, very manipulative, very had unethical behavior toward women, an egocentric lack of concern for others. So think about that. So what we've heard is that Mr. Koberger was one of those individuals that would corner his coworkers to the extreme that he wouldn't let them just walk away in the conversation where he would feel that he had to keep them in his presence and in the control factor. So, accompanied by deceitfulness, irresponsibility, manipulative, and or risk taking. So let me ask you a question. You don't believe that he was risk taking in his behaviors? You don't think he was taking risks by knowing that if I continue to talk to my students like this, they're they're gonna they're gonna file a complaint against me. They're gonna feel like I am targeting them. Because this day and age, it doesn't take a lot for people to start feeling trapped or controlled. So, an egocentric, callous lack of concern for others would be you grading your clients or your student just a little harsher than you would you grading the females a little harsher than you would the males. So think about that. Is that being callous? Well, to a lot of people, that was callous, especially the people who he was grading their papers. It's like I write the same thing or better than my male counterparts, and you pick apart my paper. You, I've, I've read this explained like this. You mansplain what it is that you're trying to get over. So let's talk about the antisocial personality disorder section 2. The diagnostic criteria state a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others occurring since age 15 years, as indicated by three or more of the following. So there is a diagnostic criteria that someone needs to meet in order to have this personality disorder placed upon them. So let's look back on age 15 of Mr. Koberger. I believe that at that period in his life, he was indeed either in a rehab or heading to a rehab. So, if that's true, then think about some of the criminogenic need that he had at that point. Because one thing that people fail to understand is if there is addiction and there is violation of the rights of others, to the extreme that you're buying something illegal to escape reality and it is against the law, that is criminal in all regards, no matter how you look at it. If it's against the law, it's against the law. There is no byproduct of, well, this is against the law unless you have constant pain, and then it's okay for you to abuse it or use it. And a lot of people don't like hearing that because you know what? Just like what we're talking about today, a lot of people don't like that feeling of being controlled because they don't like to conform to societal norms. And in that retrospect, they do anything and everything to get away from accountability. So, since we're talking about the failure to conform to societal norms with respect to lawful behaviors as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. So, I'm going out on a limb here. Did he not get arrested for pawning his sister's iPhone? No matter how much you want to minimize that, no matter how much you want to say that that wasn't that big of a deal, um, it was a big deal. You know why? Because that was a criminal behavior. And you say, well, he was at this point in his life, he was, you know, he was having problems, he was doing this, that, and the other. Well, let me ask you, how many of you today are at a low point in your life, or do you know that somebody is at a low point in their life and they're not going around stealing other people's property and pawning it? That is just a question. Deceitfulness is indicated by repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. I haven't heard anything other than the pawning of the cell phone as far as deceitfulness is concerned. But, or him using an alias or anything else. But one thing for certain, the people that knew him the best were going to be some of the people that were possibly going to take the stand had there been a trial. The impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. Well, you say, well, maybe they're just bad at time management. Could that be it, 12? Well, I would tell you no. I would tell you no. The impulsivity means that, you know what, if you're going to do something, you're going to do it without the regard of the safety of yourself, others, or the people who you victimize. Or the failure to plan ahead would mean that you didn't think this through. You didn't think this all the way through. You thought that if you did this, then there would be no way that you could get caught, or there would be no way that you would be held accountable. So, in that retrospect, that is very antisocial. The irritability and aggressiveness is indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. And one of the things that we learned about Mr. Koberger was that as he lost weight, supposedly, he started becoming a bully. He started becoming an individual that repeatedly was bullying other people. Did that make him a killer? Of course not. Is that a warning sign early on? It could be. Reckless disregard for the safety self of others. So, one thing that I know is drug addiction because that's what I deal with on a daily basis. Been doing that for about 23, 24 years now. So, and I deal with individuals breaking the law. So, reckless disregard for safety of self or others. If you don't believe that you getting high in society is a reckless disregard for the safety of others, then I can't convince you of that. I can't convince you otherwise because you already have your mind made up. I hear all the time, well, you know what? I've never heard of somebody driving high and killing anybody. Well, just because you haven't heard about it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, right? So the reckless disregard for the safety of self or others. Well, the reckless safety disregard would be that you yourself are putting yourself in harm's risk due to the things that you do. Well, Mr. Koberger was putting himself at risk being a TA because he not only singled out female students to grade harshly, he was also singling out female professors in which he would overpower with his words or with his directfulness, and he would show up late for their classes while the other classes he would be on time. So the consistent irresponsibility is indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. Well, this is one of the things that we do know about individuals that have been serial killers or individuals that have had trouble with the law. There's an inability for them to keep a job. They cannot hold on to a job to save their life. They have this job for a while and then they get burnt out or they get angry or they feel like their manipulative tactics aren't working. They create a disturbance and then they quit for whatever reason. And these are some of the indicators. So the individual is at least 18 years old. There's evidence of conduct disorder with the onset before the age of 15 years old. So conduct disorder is basically the minimized version of antisocial behavior. So how many individuals that you research in this true crime genre meet these criteria? I said 15, this says 18, my bad. So how many people in the true crime genre have you researched that meet this criteria? Because it's not spoke upon. It's really not. We speak on the crime, we speak on what the person supposedly did, we speak on family members, attributes, friends, all these people that supposedly knew victims, but we never speak on the antisocial behavior or thought or patterns. I have in some of my other videos, and I'm sure some other people have as well, but the people that I watch, they don't talk about this. They talk about their own emotional attachment to cases. They talk about how they feel about the case, how they feel that this person is right where the police got it wrong or where the judicial system got it wrong or the camera got the wrong guy. So in some of these aspects that I've talked about with some of these cases, and we're talking about Mr. Koberger at this point, think about this. Before he would being prepared to go to trial. He had to have a psychological evaluation done. He may have even had a psychiatric one done as well. For what purpose? So that they would know that he was culpable or competent to stand trial. So if he would not have been competent mentally, he wouldn't have stood trial. Think about that a minute. So he was competent enough to stand trial based on their psychological evaluation. Think of all that. That's the thing that I want to see. Many of you want to see cameras. Many of you want to see this, that, and the other. I want to see those psych evals. I want to see the breakdown of what made Koberger who Koberger is. Not based on other people's recollection, but what the psychiatrists, the psychologists were able to find whenever they were asking him and deep diving into his psyche. What did they find? What did they find? Hey, Jeff H. The occurrence of antisocial behavior is not exclusively during the course of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. And we haven't heard either way whether that was in this case at all. So we can rule that one out. But many people want to see variations of more camera footage or his interrogation. I don't want to see all that. It'd be nice, but I want to see his psych eval. I want to see the questions, how he answered these certain questions regarding his life. Did he try to intellectualize the answer, or did he honestly just answer accordingly? Because he had to have been coherent to the point of understanding of his charges and what he was facing before they before they even went to the grand jury. Because if he wasn't, they wouldn't have even went to the grand jury. If he was not capable of understanding on a mental capacity his charges, what he was being possibly indicted for, they never would have made it to the grand jury. They would have waited until he became mentally aware enough to understand the charges that he was facing. So the fact that they went to the grand jury tells me that there was something in that psych eval that told them this man understands what is being formed against him, what he is possibly going to court for. We found various patterns and traits of understanding on this individual to get just a little deeper in the mindset of Brian Koberger. I don't believe that Kathleen Ramsland knows him on that level, Jeff. I mean, it'd be like me giving a diagnostic on you only on the basis that I've had you up on panel. Does that make sense? Like I could give people the diagnostic of, well, Jeff seems like a good guy. He seems like a guy that's very thought provoking, a guy that's very um, consistent with his thought pattern. Would he be a killer? Who the hell knows? You know what I mean? So the aspect of her being able to give us very much, I think it's wishful thinking. Where we would get the meat and potatoes of it would be in a psych eval. The doctor that evaluated him before the grand jury. That would be the area where we would get that psych eval and it would be able to tell us everything about Brian Koberger. So here's the proposed diagnostic criteria. It says moderate or greater impairment in personality functioning manifested by characteristic difficulties in two or more of the following of the four areas. So that, let me back up just a minute. So if somebody meets three or more of these, then they are more than likely diagnosed with an antisocial personality. Three or more of these. And it has to be all of these that are consistent with what they're dealing with. So this is moderate or greater impairment in personality functioning manifested by characteristic difficulties in two or more of the following: the identity, the egocentrism, the self-esteem derived from personal gain, power, or pleasure. So we know that individuals that that are dealing with charges such as murder, rape, um, assault, all these things, is their identity egocentric? Is their self-esteem derived from personal gain, the power, or the pleasure that they get from hurting others? I would believe that he did get power and pleasure from hurting the four. Which ones? Probably the two that were the most brutal. The self-direction, goal setting based on personal gratification, absence of pro-social internal standards associated with failure to conform to lawful or culturally normative ethical behavior. So, a lot of people want to defend Brian because they say he wasn't a criminal. Okay, he wasn't a criminal, right? But how many of you break the law on a daily basis based on what I'm talking about right now? Your self direction is based on your own personal gratification. So, do you manipulate the time clock? Do you steal a little bit at a time from this or there? Do you run red lights? Do you not pay your tickets? Do you fudge on your income tax? Do you um, do you misinform certain agencies of certain people that are living in your household or whatever? Well, let me tell you, you're breaking the law in any of these aspects. So you can say murder is one thing, but breaking the law is breaking the law. And that's what I don't understand when people talk about, he wasn't that type of person. He was a PhD student. He was this, he was that. But his supposed behavior, had they pressed charges against him, would have been breaking the law. Following a student out to their car to the point where they're scared of you is breaking the law. Hey, Walt, long time. To you, assisting an individual set up a camera and supposedly having that camera stream forwarded to you where you could watch this individual is breaking the law. And I'm just going on these because these have been stated, not because they've been founded. You get the point that I'm saying is a lot of people get caught up in the fact that just because you've been accused of something doesn't make you guilty. Okay, well, think of it this way. If how many people use fraud on this internet on a daily? It's criminal, right? And you call it out and you talk about it and you get angry, even though they've never been charged. They're still criminal minded. So, if nothing else, it teaches you to stay away from those type of people. So, your goals are being set based on personal gratification. The absence of pro social internal standards, you have no empathy towards others. You associate with failure to conform to lawful or culturally normative ethical behavior. A TA should be ethical regarding grading papers. They should not have favoritism. They should not be so egocentric that they demean any of their students, no matter what. There's a reason they're in your class, Brian, is because they're not PhD level students. You're supposed to be teaching them, not critiquing them as if they're your minions. And if that doesn't tell you a lot right there, I don't know what to tell you. Because a lot of people get so fixated on proving the evidence that people have against them wrong that they don't even talk about these things. They dismiss it as, oh, it's no big of a deal. He was just doing a job. Okay, well, he was doing a job. But you be a student in that damn classroom and you write your ass off and you spend your money to go to this college and you happen to be an attractive female and this fucker targets you. based on the fact that his insecurities are going to get back at you because you are an example of everything he could never have. So the only power he would gain would be by grading you harshly or talking down to you or even following you out to your car trying to throw his shot the best way he knew how. Empathy. Let's go about empathy. So you might agree or disagree with me, but I can tell you one thing that I'm not doing right now. I'm not presenting this on an emotional attachment. I'm really not. That's the difference between me and a lot of other creators. Is this isn't emotionally attached to me? I can have empathy with this next wording, mean that if you don't have it, you have the lack of concern for the feelings, needs, or suffering of others. You lack in remorse after hurting or mistreating another person. I can understand what it means to be a female being harassed by Brian Koberger. Even though I've never been a female, I can put myself in that place and say that had to be a horrifying experience. I can put myself in the place of Dylan where if I see somebody I never saw in my home pass by me, I'm going to be scared to death at 19 years old. Have I ever been a 19-year-old female? No. But the individuals that can't do that or won't do that based on whatever agenda they're on, they lack empathy, just like the one they're trying to defend. Because you think Brian Koberger honestly had empathy towards others? No, he did not. Nothing we've read shows that he had empathy other than a suspected incident where he saved a coworker's life. So I give him that. I give him that kudo, okay? But everything else we've heard, not a damn speck of it once he got to WSU. Not one. So what happened between when he was a teen all the way up until WSU? What happened? And that's the question I've been wanting answered all this time. I don't want all these other emotionally charged questions answered. I don't care. I don't care about the girl who dated him back in the day. I don't care about the people that attended his class. I care about the victims that he victimized along the way because that shows motive. That shows the patterns of his life that led to the possible murders of these four kids. And you know, one thing for certain, you want people to ask, well, why did they read those papers, those I-60s and those reports and all this stuff from him in prison? Well, you know why people are so fixated on that? Because they're trying to show you nothing changes, nothing changes. And I've said that before, that person, Jeff, so, but I've heard that before. Nothing changes, nothing changes. So if you're seeing these papers being written by Brian about complaining about this and complaining about that, that's showing you that he still feels that he's above the law. He's above the guards because in his mind, he's the smartest man in the room. I've read the whole policies and procedures, and you're breaking them. The lack of empathy says that, you know what, bro? That might be in a policy and procedure, but just because we break it doesn't mean it's intentional regarding your rights. And isn't that what we heard leading up to the eventual trial? Is Brian Koberger's rights were being broken? Document after document, we were hearing that his rights were being disregarded. This right was being broken. This right was broken. This right was broken. Well, we come to find out none of those rights were broken. not in the aspect in which they were presenting it. Because it seems like nowadays, instead of presenting facts, if you don't put an emotional spin on it, then that doesn't dramatize it enough for people to understand it. So the fact that the empathy card, I believe he has lack of empathy for others. He don't have, because what type of what type of individual would sign a plea deal and then later on say, I'm not paying it? After you yourself stood up there and admitted that you killed these people and that you broke into their home, just like the judge said, you chose that plea deal to take the death penalty off. But now you want to play games and say that you refuse to pay? Well, the judge showed him, right? Because you know what? You choose a plea deal, it comes as a contractual piece of paper that means that this is what you're going to do. And you can't squirm your way out of it, no matter how much you refuse to want to pay. This case has been this way from day one. It's been a case that one side says this, the other side counteracts it. But you know one thing the defense failed to do in everything they did? And nobody talked about this either. Even though it wasn't a trial, none of anything that they did created reasonable doubt in my mind that he wasn't the killer. Not one thing. So their inability to do that and then to plead out tells me that they've known all along that he was the killer. Whether you believe that or not, that's not between you and I. That's between you and your own thought pattern. Let's get to the next one, such as empathy. The incapacity for mutually intimate relationships, as exploitation is the primary means of relating to others, including by deceit and coercion, using of dominance or intimidation to control others. Wording, a lot of times using your words against people is a way to be dominant over them. Do you believe he was trying to be dominant over the officer who pulled him over on the WSU campus and was going to give him a citation for going through the crosswalk? Do you believe he was trying to exert dominance there? Do you believe he was trying to exert dominance when he got pulled over the night that they got his telephone number and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt? Do you believe that he was trying to exert dominance in that fashion? Because if you believe that, then you believe that this individual's lack of empathy and intimacy toward other people or human being is missing. Is missing. Does this mean he's a killer? Does it not? How can it not? Only time will really, you know, only time and books and everything else will eventually tell us everything we need to know. 6 or more of the following 7 pathological personality traits. Manipulativeness, we've talked about that. Frequent use of sabotage, superphage to influence or control others. Use of seduction, charm, glibness, or ingratification to achieve one's end. I don't believe he used seduction or charm, but he was manipulative in his wording. He followed out Professor Snyder to his vehicle, wanting to talk to him about any random thing to hold him hostage. Of what? His time. Collusiveness, an aspect of antagonism, It's the lack of concern for feelings or problems of others, lack of guilt or remorse about the negative or harmful effect of one's actions or others, aggression or sadism. So you understand what that is, right? You're being deceitful by saying, okay, I knew that I cornered my coworker, but I wasn't trying to harm her. I just put my arms out and kept her from leaving, even though she was stating to me that she wanted to go. I'm being deceitful because I failed to realize with the lack of empathy or the lack of intimacy towards other people that my deceitfulness is causing uncomfortable feelings in a lot of people. And you can deny a lot of things, but you cannot deny that he didn't make people uncomfortable. Does that make somebody a potential killer? Yes, it does. You can argue that fact all you want. You can argue that fact, but think about this since we were in grade school, since we were in kindergarten. The stinky kids, the kids that were poor and impoverished, the have and the have nots. How many of how many times did those kids get picked on and bullied and thrown outside of the status circles? I've seen what happened in those regards to the children. Does it happen all the time? No. Some of them harm themselves, some of them break the law and harm other people and get revenge. And that seems what's going on in this day and age. But in the past, a lot of times those individuals just faded away and they hurt themselves and they probably hurt others. They might have not have killed them, but they did things that would hurt these people on the aspect of it being abnormal. Because that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about abnormal versus normal. I'm not talking about breaking the law or not breaking the law. I'm not talking about coulda, woulda, shoulda. I'm not talking about foreseeing in the future. I'm talking about the here and now. I'm talking about motivational interviewing. What you see is what you get, and the patterns leading up to the moment that you see these people is dead on. And then if you notice later on as you're viewing these people that it continues to be a pattern, guess what? That is their personality. Whether it was warped by you or whether it was warped by society, you can't deny that this person became who they became because it was somebody else's fault. At one particular point, they're making that choice to be who they are and using the programming from the past as their ammunition and defense against the world. So I want you to think about that a minute. When you see somebody being deceitful, when you see them embellishing or fabricating events, there's a reason they're doing that. We call these people liars, we call them dishonest. If they're little enough, we call them fairy tales. How many times have you heard somebody embellish the truth because they wanted to fit in? Because they wanted to not feel less than, but to fit into whatever it was that they viewed as of importance. Was Brian Koberger deceitful? You've read the documents, you've seen the videos, you've heard what people said about him. You answer that question. Did he self embellish himself? Did he fabricate when relating events to others? Because these 6 things of these 7 traits, if a person has these, they're antisocial. Hostility, persistent or frequent angry feelings, anger or irritability in response to minor slights and insults. This means nasty or vengeful behavior. And as we know, revenge is one of the areas where people kill other people. Revenge is one of them. Jealousy, monetary, risk taking behaviors, engagement in dangerous, risky, or potentially self damaging activities, unnecessary and without regard for consequences, boredom, proneness, and thoughtfulness, initiation of activities to counter boredom, the lack of concern for one's limitations, and denial of the reality of personal danger. I believe that he took risk. You can't tell me him riding around the area 23 times was not a risk taking behavior. Him pinging at least 12 of those times was not a risk taking behavior. Him going back supposedly the next morning from 9 to 9:17 was a risk taking behavior. Him being at Costco, being on camera was a risk taking behavior. Him going around the Cup of Joe, him driving his own freaking car, him not leaving the cell phone at his home was a risk taking behavior. And let's not forget all the camera footage that we have of this individual, supposedly. I'm not going to say supposedly because he pled to it. So I'm going to say, yeah, all the camera footage we have of him. It's no longer innocent until proven guilty because I don't believe that he's innocent. The man himself stood up in front of God and everybody said that he did this. So for you to discredit the law enforcement, government, everything under the sun, you should be mad at him. You should be mad at him for not fighting for his rights if you believe they were violated. Why are you mad at police? Why are you mad at government? Why are you mad at all these other entities? Why are you mad at Dylan? Why are you mad at Bethany? Be mad at the person who stood up there and said, yes, 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 yes. You can make it anything you want. He was pressured. He was coerced. No, he wasn't. He was asked if any of those things happened. And for those of you that believe that Brian was an honest person because he did over embellish on the seatbelt thing, you don't believe he would have said first and foremost, yes, they tried to offer me this and that if I told them where the knife was. You damn right he would have said that. He's snitching in prison on the people down the run on paper to the laws. He's snitching. So you can't convince me that he wouldn't have told it. And the fact that he's snitching like he is tells you that he views himself as a virtuous person. Let's talk about the next one, impulsivity. Acting on the spur of the moment in response to immediate stimuli, acting on a momentary basis without a plan or consideration of the outcome, difficulty in establishing and following plans. How many of you in this chat are impulsive on anything? Impulsive buying. The holidays are coming, Christmas is coming. How many of you really don't have the money, but you're going to go buy anyway because you just don't want to see little Johnny not have a good Christmas or your grandchild or whatever? You know what I mean? How many of you are going to see something that you don't have to have, but you're going to buy it? I don't know if we have any women in the chat. I see Kim's in here, but I don't know if she's still in here. Kim, have you went to Starbucks and got yourself one of those glass little Starbucks bears that every woman in America is impulsively buying for $24? Or any male that's bought that little bear for somebody they love. That is an impulse buy. You know why? Because you're viewing it everywhere and quote unquote everyone is having this for the holiday season as a commemorative kind of deal for Starbucks. That is an impulse buy. So How does an antisocial person be impulsive? Well, you know what? They don't have the empathy. They don't have the connection, the connection to people, places, or thing. So whatever they do, they think they can do it without consequence. Okay. All right. I was just asking. I didn't know if you bought that little bear, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Walt said, I just reserved a bowling lane for $54. There you go. That could have been impulsive. Today's my day off. I can go and be impulsive today. And I got paid yesterday. It's a very dangerous day for 12 gauge. But I have to pay the bills first. That's the difference between somebody who understands and somebody who just lives by whatever their feelings are. So if you're impulsive, based on your opinion on the documents, the videos, all the things we've seen about Brian, did you see anything in black and white or in a video that would show you the individual was impulsive? I'm asking you because at this point, it's not about me telling you. It's about me asking you. Because there's no way that I'm here to change your mind. That's not what this channel's about. And I hate that it's been pigeon-toed to that retrospect because it's not. I'm asking you, was he impulsive? Let me give you some of the impulsive evidence that the police have. Okay, the impulsiveness was not leaving his cell phone at home. Impulsive, not being mindful of the cameras to and from. I get that, the OCD, I get that. But at the same time, even with that, we don't know if he was on medication for that. So we can't assume that it was untreated. You get what I'm saying? Like if there was any kind of treatment for that, impulsive would be something that you don't have control over. Kind of like the OCD, kind of like what you're saying. Impulsive would be not checking for cameras. Impulsive would be of every other night that you had to commit this crime, you chose the 13th of November. Many people try to find semblance in that number scheme all over, whatever. Could it have semblance? Of course. Could it not? Of course. But think about that. Was it an impulsive move? Kaylee wasn't leaving to Texas the next day. She was probably leaving to Texas, as I remember it correctly, and I could be wrong, either Monday or Tuesday. She was leaving. So him being impulsive and doing this on a Saturday into Sunday night or Sunday morning, that would be impulsive. Right? Going into Costco without a membership. Yeah, that's impulsive. That's impulsive. I need some coffee. I want some coffee. So I'm going to walk in and I'm going to demand that I get some coffee. And a lot of us have done that. Does that make us a killer? No. But with that personality trait plus others that have been a pattern in our lives that lead to other events that have been criminal, then you have to start looking like an investigator rather than a person who is just looking to discredit a lot of things that you've already seen. Because a lot of the stuff, to be honest, probably wasn't even going to make the trial. And we're discrediting it because no other reason than it's something to talk about. And I'm not hating on you for that. Irresponsibility, the disregard for and failure to honor financial and other obligations or commitments, lack of respect for and lack to follow through on agreements and promises. I would say that Brian was irresponsible in the retrospect that man knew when he got to Washington he needed to change his plates. He knew those plates needed to be changed. And he waited till after the murders to change them. Did you just hear me? If you're going away to college to another town and you know that's going to be your permanent residence, you need to take care of business because they give you 6 weeks or, yeah, 6 weeks, I think, to change your address on your driver's license unless you are a college student that's going back home. But we didn't even hear that he was going back home to live. We haven't heard anything. So if he was going to make Pullman his present residence, he would have changed his driver's license, he would have changed his tags, his license plate, everything. But the fact that he didn't do that till after the murders, what that tell you? If you're in an investigative mind, not trying to pin it on him, but what that tell you? That you get to town, he doesn't change his plates, he doesn't check in with the DMV, because if I do that, then they're going to have me on record. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear this because it goes against everything that you've heard in these 3 years, and that's okay. I'm not here to be the fan favorite. I'm just here to throw stuff out there that is only logical. I've talked about this off camera with people nonstop early on. And here's some of the specifiers. A distinct variant, often termed psychopathy or primary psychopathy, is marked by a lack of anxiety or fear, negative affectivity domain, the withdrawal or the detachment, the high levels of attention seeking, antagonism domain. You don't believe that Brian was attention seeker? You don't believe that he was an attention seeker? Because supposedly he'd go to U of I, walk around their student union, and just sit there and stare at people. That's not attention seeking behavior to you? Kim, I know you work with kids. I know that you understand what I'm talking about regarding attention seeking behavior. It could be anything. It could be following you around. It could be you asking random questions just to keep this person engaged. I have a kid that comes to classes just to get that ability to relate to other kids. You get what I'm saying? He doesn't get to hang out with other kids his age, so he gets to come to classes, and that's when he acts out. That's when he's tried to be the funny kid. That's when he tried to be the suave kid. That's when he, all this stuff, all these behaviors come out. And that's not him behind the scenes when it's just one on one. So I ask you, was Brian an attention seeker? Only you can answer that. Don't look at it as, if I say yes, will that make him a killer? Don't look at it like that. I heard, I don't know what that word is, gibbetai, toilet, and baby oil. I've, I've yet to hear that, thank God. But that is attention seeking behavior, just saying random stuff. I believe that he was attention seeking when he would be teaching his classes because he would randomly be doing or saying something that obviously caught the attention of other students to the point where they were keeping tally on when he showed up to class tardy or when he did not. And I want you to hear me out. I'm not making him a killer. I'm not unmaking him a killer. I am just putting this out there because this is what professionals do whenever they're looking at people, not through the lens of YouTube, not through the lens of bias, but through the lens of just human behavior. Kim is one in here, she's a teacher. She's able to look at people through human behavior, not based on her bias of what this kid is or what he isn't. I hope that that's who she is, you know? Because a lot of teachers have that superpower. They're able to see the smelly kid, the malnourished kid, all these kids that don't have, they're able to give them love where other people are going to be like, ooh, stay away from me. Don't talk to me. Get away. Not the teachers. Hope I mean, I know the teachers we used to have, but maybe the teachers these days they're wanting to sleep with kids and all this other stuff. I mean, it's just a twisted reality that we have going on these days. But back to what I'm talking about. You know what? He was an attention seeker, I believe. And he was irresponsible in a lot of areas. You know, another area that he was irresponsible? You remember in his apartment, we saw all those parking tickets and all those tickets? The ticket that he got that night for seatbelt. And I have that ticket in my email. Do I have it right offhand? No, I don't. Think about this irresponsibility. When you get a ticket and they give you 15 days to show up to court to address that, that means in those 15 days you got that leeway to be addressing your ticket. Not one time did he go address it. Not one time did he make a payment for it. He didn't show up for court and he paid it. But he was still irresponsible because he was more worried about that night of him being right than the follow through. I want to tell you something about that little aspect right there. Okay? There's a level of individual when they're shown that they're not as smart as they think they are. And this is usually with individuals that are criminogenic, criminal minded, antisocial. When you show them that they're not as smart as they think they are, they tend to retract from reality. They tend to go hide out. If you're on parole, they stop showing up to groups. They stop showing up to report. They stop showing up to do all these things because you have shown them that they are not who they present to the world. So the fact that that policeman did not let Brian get over on him, he said, "Well, I'll show you. I won't even show up to the hearing to defend myself." Let's fast forward it. I won't even take it to trial. I'll plead out. Do you get what I'm talking about right now? Let's take it to the tavern where the owner was telling him, hey, quit hitting on my waitresses, bro. I don't know what you're talking about. And never went back. Because this is the behavior that you see in antisocial people. They want to coexist by demeaning and running through the world as if it's their own world and not following rules, guidelines, or laws. But when you call them and when you put their nose to the grindstone and they're able to escape, they don't stay around very long. And thank you for that. I appreciate that because I'm not, I'm just, I'm just giving you what I've seen in life, not necessarily, comparing to what you've seen. You know what I mean? It's not a comparison. It's not I'm right, you're wrong. You're right, I'm wrong. You know what I mean? I appreciate your open mindedness on that, Kim. I really do. So if we get to the plea deal And all this time, they tried to cause reasonable doubt with what they want taken out, what they want suppressed, what they want shown. And you basically shown Ann Taylor that she's not going to get anywhere. He fled out. Just like he didn't show up for the ticket. Just like he would show up tardy to meetings when the female instructors would be teaching. Picking and choosing who he could get over on, who he could manipulate, who could he overpower, what situations could he control, and what situations were bigger than him to control. And in those situations, he fell back. And once again, you can agree or disagree. You know what I mean? That's part of being human. So let's go to the next one. Trait and personality functioning specifiers may be used to record other personality features that may be present in antisocial personality disorder, but are not required for the diagnosis. Traits of negative affectivity, anxiousness are not diagnostic criteria for antisocial personality disorder, but can be specified when appropriate. And I'm going to say something right now, okay? And I should have said this at the beginning, but I wasn't thinking. There's a difference between a mental disorder and a personality disorder. And I believe that that's where we have such a distinct line drawn in the sand when it comes to our mental health these days. Because a lot of times, if somebody has, let's see, I'm trying to think of a personality disorder. I can't think of one right offhand. Let's see what a personality disorder. I guess OCD would be. Wait, let's see. Let's see. Borderline personality, antisocial, narcissistic, histrionic, avoidant disorder, dependent, obsessive compulsive. Yeah, klepto. So those are personality disorders, meaning that with medication and treatment, you can overcome those. Okay? You can be a functioning person in society. So yeah, it said detachment. Whenever somebody talks about mental health issues such as bipolar, um, depression, anxiety, those as well with medication, somebody can coexist and have functionality. But one thing that I want you to remember is that a lot of times when people have mental health issues and they're off their medication, most of them don't commit crimes. A lot of times in this true crime genre, we believe that serial killers, or most of them that have been identified with mental health issues, well, that was the case. That's why they committed the crime, because they were crazy. And that's not the case. Most people that are mentally ill do not commit crimes. And I hope that you hear that from the loudest mountain. So you say, okay, well, Brian was mentally ill. No, he wasn't. He had personality disorders. There's a difference. Those personality disorders were so profound, obviously, that it caused aspects in his life of functioning to potentially get him classified as a creepy, detached individual. whether you believe that or not. And we know a lot of creepy, detached individuals. Are they killers? No. But for every person we say no, there's at least three people we would say yes, most definitely. They are capable of it. That's why I'm saying I want to see the psychological breakdown. I want to see that paperwork. I want to see the psych eval. I want to see the psychiatric evaluations. I want to see those aspects of it because that tells you more than anything that you're viewing today. Anything. Interviews, okay, you want to listen to an interview, but you want to critique it to death based on what you hear and what your understanding of the case is, not the end time frame of the individual being interviewed. They were interviewed hours later after the crime. So here we are 3 years later, finally getting to see an interview that took place hours later, and we critique the hell out of the interview or the interviewee because we don't like them, because we don't trust them, because they're more culpable in our eyes of committing the crime than Brian was. But whenever the police have shown you that there's investigative traits that they identified within this individual, nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to hear that. Maybe used to record other personality features that may be present in antisocial personality disorder, but are not required for the diagnosis. The traits of negative affectivity, like I just said, anxiousness, are not diagnostic criteria for antisocial personality disorder, but can be specified when appropriate. The level of personality functioning can also be specified, although moderate or greater impairment of personality functioning is required for the diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. So, I'm going to go over this and then I'm going to call it, because this is a long video, and for a lot of people that are watching this, hopefully they go all the way to the end, because I'm trying to not only educate people on what it really is versus the perception and reality, because it's very distorted. So if you view somebody who's high functioning as your understanding, going through college, getting degrees, doing this, that, and the other, that high functioning person could not have committed that crime. But at the same retrospect, we don't know behind the scenes only different variations of this antisocial personality that obviously this individual had based on the example that I've given you. And you could say yay or nay. I mean, either way, it doesn't matter. So this says the high prevalence of associated anxiety disorder, depressive disorders, substance use disorders, 80 to 85%. And we knew he was a past drug user. Somatic symptom disorder, did he possess somatic symptoms? Did he constantly complain of headaches? Did he complain of stomach ache? Did he complain of backache? Did he complain of any kind of somatic symptoms? Gambling disorders and other disorders of impulse control. Co-occurrence of other personality disorders, other cluster B, borderline, histrionic, narcissistic personality disorders, and a childhood onset of conduct disorder before the age 10, an accompanying attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, increased likelihood that conduct disorder will evolve into antisocial personality disorder, child abuse or neglect, unstable or erratic parenting, or inconsistent parental discipline. So was he raised in, hey Cash, how you doing, buddy? Was he raised in an environment that was inconsistent regarding punishment and rewards? Was there a good cop, bad cop in his home? Was there any child abuse or neglect? Because all those, whether you believe it or not, can lead to conduct disorders. and a person. We're discussing the antisocial killer traits, and I'm using Mr. Koberger as an example. I can use anybody under the spectrum that would honestly fit these criteria. We could use BTK, we could use Danny Rowland, we could use um, any of them, based on what we know, and they would fit this criteria. And I'm going to stop sharing that. But I want you to really think of what I've spoke on today. If you really are invested in this case, to really find those answers that you're chasing, not because I'm going over it, because you might not like me. You might not like my presentations. You might not like my personality. But I can tell you, it's not about the person presenting it, it's about the information being presented. You know, could Koberger have been a killer? Of course, just like any of us can. Any of us in this room, especially watching on replay or anything, we're pushed to the limit of any capacity. We have the capacity to kill. Even though we are by nature driven to live, we do have the capacity to kill. So to say that this man didn't know any of the victims, so therefore that instantly rules him out, I would suggest that you stop looking so much as ruling him out or ruling out the investigation and start focusing more on the understanding of what the investigation brought you. Deep dive in that aspect, because then you're going to really understand other crimes, why certain things look this way when they really are that way. I believe the gag order ruined this case on so many aspects. I believe all the circus mentality of the defense attorney, with all the crap that she was presenting in front of the cameras, derailed the case. The prosecution, they didn't have a clean case either. But just because they didn't have a clean case does not mean that they didn't have the evidence needed to present to a jury that would convince them without a reasonable doubt that this man was indeed guilty. But they didn't get that chance because the individual pled. And whether you agree with pleading guilt is not meaning he did it, I don't know how that makes sense in your mind. I really don't. But yet, you can understand when a close friend of yours passes away, and you can show empathy for that, but you can't show empathy for four people you don't know, and you categorize them as killers or potential suspects. That doesn't make sense. But hey, I'm not here to make sense of other people. You know what I mean? I believe that Mr. Koberger was one of those people that I've seen multitudes of time across from my desk, who was always thought that they were the jailhouse lawyer, that they they were going against the guards every opportunity by every write-up. They were the individual that tried to show you that they really didn't have a drug problem or they weren't the criminal that they were made out to be. But look at it this way. If I'm having to convince you so much of my ability to be this person based on my training and understanding of humanity and human nature, that is an immediate red flag. If I'm trying to tell you that I'm a good person and you should trust me, that should instantly tell you that, why do I need to tell you? Why can't I just show you? You get what I'm saying? kind of like a car dealer tells you, well, you've come to the right place. I give, fair, and I give you your best bang for your buck. Why are you telling me this right off the bat, even before I bought the car? You get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? If I have to put a disclaimer out there for you, that means that I'm already protecting the back end of your perceptions. So anything that I say after that, you can say, well, he did say he was a legit salesman, or he did say he was a nice guy, just like what Cass just said. Or you're out on a date and you have to tell your date, hey, I'm a nice guy. I would never take advantage of you. And you've even gotten dinner yet? You better leave at that point because you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know how to take no for an answer, and they're trying to bring your bring your inhibition down enough for you to trust them. That's just a little psychology there. Just a little psychology there. And what I want to tell you about psychology is all these theories and all these abilities to look in human behavior and adapt these theories and understanding isn't just about reading the theory. It's about actually knowing how to work it with human beings. So me talking about it on here, it may not mean anything to you, but if you saw it in action, then you would say, you know what, this guy knows what he's talking about. Just be mindful of who you follow because not everybody is out for the truth. Not everybody's out for justice. And I'm not at this point, and I never was, other than to show that the four needed somebody to be accountable for their murders. Somebody needed to be accountable. And I believe that the right person stood up and said yes 5 times. Because why else would you stand up and be so idiotic to take the blame of something you didn't do when your life was so full of promise, as other people say, and yet you threw all that away just to go sit in prison for the rest of your life? Stop trying to figure them out until you get the psych eval, and then you'll have something to deep dive. And you might see something you might not like, or you might see something in that psych eval that really makes sense, that shows you that he had more of a prevalence to be a killer than not. Yeah. I'm just using him as an example because everybody knows who he is. And like I said, there's a lot of antisocial killers that cross our path every day. The stepbrother who killed his sister, supposedly. If we deep dive into what that stepbrother was about, there's a chance that that stepbrother would meet the criteria of an antisocial person. Because there's a lot of them in society. There is a lot of them. I know there's a lot questioning his guilt because they don't understand the dynamics of investigation. They look at investigations as we got to prove you wrong rather than looking at the evidence and the personality traits of who this individual is and how everything that was said about him could this meet an antisocial personality disorder diagnosis. No, they use their emotional attachment as their evidence. They don't ever bring evidence. other than what another creator presents as it being evidence. I've not heard one presenter on that side talk about the psychological aspect of how he could not have been the killer. You know why? Because I'm pretty certain that that psychological aspect would have been part of another nail in that coffin. But hey, who am I? I'm just a creator on here on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. If you did, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and share button. And it is the holiday season, so any of these 3 QR codes that you feel like donating to, this is the food pantry. This one is for the American Heart Association, and this one is for breast cancer. So if you feel the need, you can click on that QR code. It goes directly to the website. You don't have to send any money to me. You can donate on the website or donate to your favorite charity. This is the time of giving. If you have a little extra and you're wondering what to do with it, go donate to somebody who doesn't have it or could use it. Because that is the best way to give. Hopefully that would be going on year round, but it is what it is. Y'all have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful weekend. I don't know if I'll be back on this weekend or not. Make sure you set your notification to on so you don't miss any of the live streams that I do. Y'all be great out there. Be safe. And always watch your six. Once again, my name is 12 Gauge, and this is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative.